is Angelina, and I'm here to talk about the feminist art movement. It happened between the 1960s and the 1970s. It was a movement that was actually ignored. And unlike that, Picasso, Van Gogh, and Da Vinci, these are all artists that we recognize by their last names. We know some of their artwork, but in detail we probably can't speak of what exactly they have done. What is art? Is it always displayed in galleries, or do we count everything as art, like our newspapers, textbooks, billboards, phone displays? The feminist art movement showed a different side of art. Its purpose was to demonstrate the possibility of equality. I have always been a fan of art, and have done my own amateur paintings and some crafts. But working in a gallery, I have realized that saying everything isn't art isn't really a good statement, because anything could be considered art. It all depends on the point of view. And I related the most with feminist artwork. So I will be presenting some of the popular artists that were brought to us with the feminist art movement. So, what makes the feminist art movement different? It started after World War II. It was from the 1960s and through the 1970s, like I mentioned. The best definition was by Judith Brodsky. Art inspired by and responsive to social, cultural, scientific, and political conditions rather than for art's sake. In other words, art was created to show and demonstrate what was happening in the world at that time, instead of art that is just created to show us another scenery that really has nothing to speak for. So, the art movement was actually led by Judy Chicago. She was probably the most popular artist that was mentioned in other textbooks. One of her greatest works had to be The Dinner Party. She actually used a triangular feminist version of The Last Supper. She used place settings to show 39 accomplished women instead of showing Christ and the apostles. And she used a tiled floor with 999 names of famous women. This represented a celebration of female achievement. And it also spoke really strongly, especially for people who were religious at the time. Martha Russler had a completely different approach. She introduced performance art and video and made videos to demonstrate the oppressive daily life of a woman. She wanted, in symptomatics of the kitchen, she was showing that women had rage and violence, and not all women wanted to be, at that time in the 1960s, they were pretty much obligated to be a housewife, and she was showing that sometimes it's not for everybody. Cindy Sherman was a graphic designer. She used her media very differently. Her art is considered actually pop art, and one of her techniques was to take a picture that was already established by an artist, and she would, in bold letters, write words across it. Like, for example, this one, "We don't need another hero," is a great example of feminism trying to say we can be our own, especially at a time like the 1960s and 70s where it wasn't something that was seen as okay for women to do. So, feminist art movement, it had passion, controversy, and it just made people think. It wasn't recognized by many textbooks. The movement itself was short-lived, maybe between 15 years. And surprisingly, I came upon a book called The Movements in the the art science in 1945. There was not one chapter of the feminist art movement, but they do speak of feminist artwork, which they mention Judy Chicago, but never the movement. So, again, Judith Brodsky, once again, she was quoted, mainstream art history texts tend to be ignored or dismiss the feminist art movement, which is true. It was ignored by almost everyone. So, this movement was led by powerful women. It did change the world because it brought out more feminist artists, and it gave a word for other women to start as artists, and it gave us almost like an equality stance. But I think the most surprising part of this whole movement not being shown is art is usually very diverse, and it's known to let everyone in of all types of art. But hopefully one day we can actually involve this movement into our textbooks, and we can see art for itself and not just for what they tell us it is. Thank you.